here is the painting in the Gallery of Battles showing Charles Martel's victory over the Muslims in the Battle of Poitiers. And if you look at it closely, the religious imagery is really very strong, and you can also see um, women uh, in the painting. If you look about in the middle, you can see a young woman cradling her baby for protection against the enemy, and then over in uh, the right side, if you look, you will see a an Islamic warrior seeming to be carrying off a Christian maiden, and this painting really is designed to represent uh, Charles Martel and the Franks as sort of on the side of Christian civilization, and then fighting off what were perceived to be, the barbaric, Muslims. So this gives you an idea of the way that the memory of this particular conflict was shaped. The leader of the Franks at Poitiers was Charles Martel, the Duke and Prince of the Frankish king of the Merovingian dynasty, but as mayor of the palace was the power behind the throne. He was king in all but name. His son, Pepin the Short, deposed the last Merovingian king and became king outright. He founded the Carolingian dynasty, named for the Latin form of Charles, that is to say, Charles Martel. Upon his death in 768, his two sons, Carloman and Charles I, co-ruled. Their relationship was extremely tense, but Carloman conveniently died in 771 AD, leaving Charles the sole master of the Frankish kingdom. The Carolingian military, this is the military of Charles Martel, and then particularly of Charlemagne, his grandson. The Carolingian military was organized according to the system used by Charles Martel, and which ultimately tracked back to the military organization of the late Roman Empire. You had to begin with a general levy composed of all able-bodied adult males who had to serve in this general responsibility for the defense of the region in which they lived. Able-bodied men living within a walled city or fortified town were required to man the defenses. There were about 100 such cities and towns within the Frankish kingdom, requiring an estimated 100,000 men to defend. In terms of age, this obligation applied to males between 15 and 55 years old, of whom there was an estimated population of between 1 million and 2 million. Then you had a select levy. For offensive purposes, a select group of both rural and urban inhabitants was required to perform military service beyond the demands of local defense. These soldiers, drawn from towns and villages, comprised the rank and file of Carolingian field armies. Rich men owning 12 estates or more were required to muster men with horse and armor. Men owning 5 estates generally owed service on campaign, but with less armament. Landowners with as little as half an estate formed into partnerships with a total wealth of 5 estates and had to provide a soldier for this select levy. So this was all based then on land ownership, depending on how much land you owned. That was how much military manpower you were required to give to the king for his campaigns. The Carolingians required all free men to take an oath of fidelity to the king and to be registered in the rolls of the county in which they lived. These counties were administrative areas presided over by a literal count, like Count Dracula, a literal count. There were about 300 counties within the empire. Charlemagne could thus muster for simultaneous military campaigns perhaps 150,000 men, of whom 35,000 were heavy cavalry. Individual armies could number as many as 35,000 to 40,000 men, although they were usually smaller than that. What we're talking about here really is an ability to mobilize a significant amount of military service. And there were near continuous wars to expand the size of the kingdom and empire and to acquire those of others. So the general levy, and the select levy. The idea was to, you had the oath of fidelity, and then you had the size of Carolingian military, okay? And then Carolingian strategy. Okay. The idea behind this was to conduct these near continuous wars to expand the size of the kingdom and empire, to hold cities that were already in the realm from capture, to acquire cities held by others, and to limit damage to enemy cities and lands, because after all, Charlemagne was going to want to control those cities and those lands for himself. The avowed reason for war was usually to expand Christianity or to support the Pope. In 773, 774, for example, Charlemagne came to the aid of the Pope, who was at war with the kingdom of the Lombards. The popes, once upon a time, controlled large regions that required conventional government and military defense. Charlemagne crossed the Alps, as shown here, overcame tough resistance, and captured the capital of the kingdom, Pavia, near present-day Milan, Italy. The Lombard king went into exile, and Charlemagne became king in his place. Charles was almost constantly at war, fighting a total of 54 campaigns, and so successfully that he became universally known as Charlemagne, which means Charles the Great. He created the greatest empire seen in Europe since the Romans. And his major conquests are all shown there in this map. And you can see that prominent conquests include the Lombard kingdom in 774, that's down in northern Italy. And then finally, Saxony, which he fought against for many, many years before finally gaining complete control of it in 797 AD. This subjugation of, I'm going to move on past this. The subjugation of the Saxons took 20 years and 18 campaigns to achieve. Charlemagne forced the Saxons to abandon their pagan beliefs in favor of Christianity, and to do it, he massacred 4,500 Saxons. For the painting that commemorates Charlemagne in the Gallery of Battles, the event the artist selected was not a battle, but rather the submission of the Saxon king in 785 AD, which signaled his abandonment of pagan beliefs and acceptance of Christianity. Charlemagne is on horseback and dominates the scene, making it clear who has brought about this event. During this period, the Carolingians moved in the direction of having more heavy cavalry. Charlemagne took an interest in the breeding of horses to produce larger, stronger ones, better able to handle the weight of a cavalryman. This was a long step in the direction of creating knights, whom we now regard as almost synonymous with warfare during the Middle Ages. Some historians once thought that the Carolingian military system generated the knight, but we now think that that was a later development. In one of his campaigns, Charlemagne came to the court of Pope Leo III, who on Christmas Day, 800 AD, crowned him emperor of a revived Western Roman Empire. This essentially made him co-equal with the emperor of the Eastern Roman Empire, by now known as the Byzantine Empire, because of its proximity to its capital Constantinople to the old Greek city of Byzantium. Here is the Carolingian Empire at the time of Charlemagne's death in 814 AD, at the age of 65 or 66 or 71, accounts differ, which suggests the limits of our knowledge of the man, that we don't even know for sure the year in which he died. The dark green represents the additions to the empire as a result of these many wars that Charlemagne fought. Charlemagne's son, Louis the Pious, assumed the throne and ruled the empire until his death in 840 AD. It then passed to his three sons. The Carolingians followed a Germanic tradition of dividing an inheritance, in this case an empire, among the sons of a ruler rather than simply giving it to the oldest son. That was a practice called primogeniture, and that's really the more common way of dividing up kingdoms, for the obvious reason that it preserves a kingdom intact. That's the obvious way to do it. It is not the way the Germanics did it, and because the Carolingians came out of a Germanic tradition, the Franks, they divided this kingdom up among the three sons of Louis the Pious. So in effect, this division created three kingdoms. And since the three brothers couldn't stand each other, they formalized this division by a treaty signed in 843 AD. The kingdom of Charles would become France. The kingdom of Louis would become the foundation of Germany. And these two powers would vie for possession of the lands controlled by Lothair in the middle. This was unfortunate because Western Europe was about to be beset by chronic incursions by the Norsemen, or the Vikings, from the north, the Muslims from the south, and the Magyars, the forebears of the Hungarians, from the east. This led to the further fragmentation of Western Europe. But the Carolingian military system greatly influenced future military institutions and practices, and nothing like the Carolingian achievement would be seen in Europe until Napoleon Bonaparte, almost 1,000 years later.